Okay, let's do it.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the FARcast. I'm Robert Phoenix, broadcasting to you live from Austin, Texas. What's going on out there? How is everybody today as we roll into what, for all intents and purposes, is the 4th of July weekend? It all starts off right here, right now, and hopefully you've got some interesting, fun, pleasant, organic, analog festivities in store. For you, maybe you're in a state where you can actually blow off some fireworks. That's what I'm going to be doing this year. I'm going to buy some fireworks and blow them off because I can. I live in Texas. How about that? Well, we're going to get into today's show without a lot of drag on the system or wasting a lot of time. Although I will say here that I'm going to be talking a little bit about Agenda 2030, Agenda 21 after I play the interview that I did with Steve Crimi this morning. And that's going to be, moving forward, that's going to be a lot of the focus of some of the work I'm going to be doing here, because I had a real revelation last night. I was up late watching YouTube videos, which I normally do, and file through a lot of things, some which are absurd and some which are interesting. And it really came to my attention in a big way that everything else is a distraction except Agenda 2030. That's what's really happening underneath the surface of everything. Everything is a distraction. And Agenda 2030, the reorientation of our cities, the smart cities, sustainability, it's all in there. And that's really the battleground. That's where we need to become aware and awake and cognizant about what is going on. To some extent, some would say we've even already lost the war. We are so far behind the curve in dealing with Agenda 2030 right now. It is here. It is shaping our cities. It is shaping our education. And I'll get into this more next week, but I'll talk a bit about it after we get into the interview with Steve. And of course, Steve is the publisher of Logos Sophia Press, and Chris, who is his partner in time, not partner in crime, partner in time, was there as well this morning. And we get into what's going on with the Pope. You know, there's some really interesting things happening in terms of structures that are falling and dissipating. One, of course, is what's going on with Veritas and CNN. And, of course, there's more out today about a producer from CNN basically calling the American voters dumb shits. And, you know, I love James Keith, man. This guy, he is a muckraker. A lot of people don't like him. They say he's manipulative, he's a con man, say whatever he wants. He's doing things that mainstream media has long since abandoned, and maybe never really did, unless it was trying to catch a perp on NBC, which they were pretty good at one point in time. But anyway, he's got CNN in the crosshairs, and we're seeing the disassembling of the mainstream media right before our very eyes. It's happening. It is happening. In fact, there's a walkout of writers from the New York Times who are not happy about the direction of the editorial. I mean, hey, guess what? There might be some people there that still have a few fractals of their soul sparkling and, actually feel like they need to make a difference. And this is also happening not just in government, but it's also happening in religion as well. The number 3 man in the Vatican was just busted for having sex with kids. It's a big deal. This guy he knows where all the money is. He's connected to the treasury in the Vatican. He's an Australian priest whose last name is Pell, P-E-L-L, Pell. And the rumor is that if he sets foot in Australia, he's going to be arrested. So this is pretty big news. This is like the number 3 guy in the Vatican. Meanwhile, the Pope is saying that we need to abandon our current social structure and make way for the one world government, which he thinks will solve all of our problems. He's a total shill. He was put in there to be a shill from the beginning. And we could just do a whole show about the Pope at some point. Maybe next week I'll do something. But that's kind of the backdrop of connecting with Steve this morning, some of the things that we talk about. And we touch on American gods and brain states and all kinds of interesting things. So let's get into it. Let's play the interview. It lasts a total of 40 minutes. And when we come out of the interview, I'll go over some of the 2030 stuff. And then we'll kind of wrap things up and wish everybody a wonderful weekend, festive 4th of July weekend. All right, here's Steve Crimi from earlier today. And we're dialoguing about all those topics that I just mentioned.
So as we do this every month at the end of the month, I bring my friend Steve Crimi with Chris on the wing, and we talk about things from a different kind of perspective. Thanks for being on the show again, Steve. How are you doing this morning?
We're doing pretty well. Well, I'm doing pretty well. I can't speak for Chris yet.
Coming awake now.
But yeah, this is generally a little earlier than our usually. Well, actually, usually we have breakfast with you, except we're listening to you. So here we are. We're doing fine.
You know, I
hope you too.
I didn't give you probably as good of a lead-in as I should. You're also an author and a publisher, and so you've got obviously those credentials next to your name. And people, if they're not aware of Steve's publishing company, Logos Sophia, check it out. Go online and see what they have to offer. Okay, I did the official bullet points there. So you sent me something yesterday about the Pope, which really grabbed my attention, and I want to just grab that here. Steve sent me this piece, and it's from the Israeli Amen Times, Israeli Islam End Times. Okay, it's a website, Israeli Islam End Times. And the Pope basically is calling for a one-world government to save humanity. I'm just going to read the first couple paragraphs here. It says, the Pope has argued that the creation of the one-world government is needed to combat major issues such as climate change. Pope Francis called for a one-world government and political authority this week, arguing that the creation of the one-world government is needed to combat major issues such as climate change. Pope Francis will this week call for changes in lifestyles and energy consumption to avert the unprecedented destruction of the ecosystem before the end of this century, according to a leaked draft of a papal encyclical in a document released by an Italian magazine on Monday. The pontiff will warn that failure to act would have grave consequences for us all. Let's just stop right there, and I want to take your temperature on this thing. What do you make of it?
Oh, sure. Well, just one interesting caveat. So that article links to a Guardian piece, and when you go to the Guardian piece, that paragraph has either been deleted or was never there. I can't tell. So there was another paragraph that is in the Guardian piece that is more about the climate control part of it. So whether that was an insertion or whether that was something that was taken out later, I can't say at this point. So just want to have that caveat out there about that. But either way, I mean, first of all, how much can you trust the Catholic Church on anything? As far as their outward, what they say in the outward. We've had friends been talking about, how wonderful this Pope is, for since he's been in office, and yeah, he may be wonderful compared to the gentleman that resigned, who was basically the hatchet man and the cover-up for the pedophilia before that. So, so in the overall picture, anyone who still goes to the Catholic Church, to me, is really still aiding and abetting the pedophilia, and then of course that ties into the the story that also came out yesterday, so that's really interesting, these two at the same time, that the head of the Catholic Church in Australia, and I can't remember his name, is it Bell or something?
He's a cardinal.
He's the cardinal, and he's also the Vatican treasurer. And he's been charged with numerous accounts of pedophilia, and it covers something along the line of a 30-year span. At least the ages of the people that are involved in it. So there are indictments against this guy, and he will be arrested the minute he lands on Australian soil. The claim being, but right now they're claiming he's a Sikh. I don't know if he can make it back to Australia. So right now the Vatican is playing the old man Sikh game to maybe keep him there. There's no extradition treaty. So anything that comes out of the Catholic Church is suspect. Suspect in their motives. I don't know if you know Robert Anton Wilson.
Oh yeah, I used to live in Berkeley, and that's where he lived, and I would see him around town a little bit. I would see him at kind of various parties I'd be invited to. Illuminatus Trilogy is one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah, so he had I watched some talk, and he basically said that the only reason the Catholic Church isn't burning people is because they can't.
That's funny.
And that's it. So they're looking to I think, be a player, in this as religions, and this might get back into American gods if we want to. Religions become more and more irrelevant. Certainly the Catholic Church has shown no care whatsoever about the environment in its history. So it seems like it wants to get into this whole, be a player in some sort of one world government and then be a big player. And this gets off to another idea because right now I'm just kind of like scattered in ideas. But the other thing I was thinking about is that, we have all this disclosure, whether it's real or not. You talked about David Wilcock and Corey Good, and we've gone into the whole pedophilia thing with all the administrations, and it's just rampant everywhere, it seems. But the thing that's never brought out, there'll be these tribunals and this, that, and the other thing. Well, who's going to hold the tribunals?
Right, exactly.
Who's going to be over everything else?
Right.
Is it going to be some alien import? with little judiciaries in the sky. I mean, what kind of thing actually does that?
Right. Yeah.
So that's the other thought. So I guess maybe if they're going to have some sort of thing like that, is it going to be still controlled by the same people, and the Catholic Church is the same people?
It's something about the United Nations that there would be like a strengthened form of the United Nations. I don't know if that's some direction you're looking in or not. It's possible.
Well, that could be the vehicle for it.
Yeah, they're famous at setting up these independent bodies, these so-called independent bodies. Robert Mueller being the latest example of that. And, of course, we have the travesty, which was the 9/11 Commission. George Pell is the guy who you're referring to, Pell. And he is not just a cardinal in Australia. He is the cardinal prelate of the Catholic Church. And he's the prefect of the Secretariat for the Economy in the Catholic Church. He is a top advisor to the Pope. Some people say he's number 3 in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. So this is not just, some ordinary priest, running a parish in anywhere USA. This guy's a major player, and it's a big deal.
And there's no way that the Catholic Church doesn't know what this guy's been up to.
Of course. This Pope, he's an interesting character. Astrologically, he's a Sagittarius. So we've seen Saturn in Sagittarius basically kind of move through his sign, and as a result, he's been asserting a lot more power. And it's almost as if when this is a little bit of astrology coming into play here. When Saturn comes in to a sign, and it transits over a planet in a chart, essentially what it's doing is it's operating as a reset. And whatever has gone before for the 29 or 30 years that it takes for Saturn to go around the chart and hit that planet, that moment in time is where everything that's been stored up is dispersed. And so out of that, there's a reset of that planet. So, for instance, if Saturn hits your sun, you go through this period of cycling through the last 30 years. There's a reset, and now you've got kind of a fresh version of the sun. Now, that said, if this Pope is Francis, who's the head of the Catholic Church, is going through this Saturn process, that as the head of the Catholic Church and being the figurehead, that the entire Catholic Church theoretically would be going through that process as well. So this is a very interesting, aspect of, at least I think, to have in terms of the Pope and in terms of him being this papal figurehead. Also, Saturn represents governing bodies, not just this reset process, but governing bodies. So if they had any kind of foreknowledge about astrology, other than the fact that this guy had been primed and ready to go in Argentina for years, clearly this would have been an interesting choice just from that aspect alone.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and I guess I don't know what that has to do with the what was going on, that this is a reset of, but it seems I lost my thought, but it seems that go ahead and say something.
I don't know where you were going.
I just spaced totally. I'm sorry.
That was a lot of information. I apologize, but it just because we talk about how these people theoretically represent these institutions, right? And so, as the Pope, he is the face, he's the head of the church. So if he's going through something astrologically, then it would make sense that the entire church would be going through that as well. And my feeling is that out of this is this kind of new reformation or whatever it is of the church that's being experienced or cycled through Francis. And that's my sense. And I don't know if they sat down and said, hey, he's a Sagittarius and let's get him in there so we can reshape the church. But I think it has some resonance here. And, one of the things that you brought up is this connection to, and we were talking about this earlier, to the UN, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, sustainability. And he's, in his own way, he's really pushing for this. That's my sense, from an ecclesiastical position.
Because because they've rebranded themselves as this environmentally friendly church, right? He's been kind of pounding on that for a long time.
Yep.
and as it ties in with that, so this whole idea, because this whole let's just say it's questionable, the aspects of climate change and where they're originating from. When every planet in our solar system is heating up, you can't fully blame our activities here.
Right.
And so it seems like they're using the environmental push, because everyone pretty much buys into it, as a control mechanism.
Yeah.
And so that'd be the control mechanism. If you're talking about collapsing the population into cities, you would have to have a good reason to make them do that willingly. And the willingly would be, we've got to save the land and everything. And, and maybe Mother Earth likes that better. I don't know. I'll have to ask her. But, so that's, so it feels like it's another control mechanism that's being foisted upon us, and and we're under layers and layers of control mechanisms, as you know.
So we're dealing with what you brought up earlier, this sort of dissipation and dissolution of traditional religion, with the exception of Islam, which seems to be growing steadily. And in the face of this, you and I, we're going to talk about American Gods, and you're ahead of this on American Gods. You're out in front of this a little bit more than I am, and I wanted to just kind of pick your brain about the series and what you can kind of read into it as it relates to some of the things that we're talking about.
Well, yeah, so American Gods is pretty interesting. It's based on a book by Neil Gaiman. I think he's executive producer, so he's got a hand in how it's going. There are a couple of interesting things, but what I like about it is the premise that gods are real, and the overall thing is that the gods, and just like everyone else, they need attention. All right, so in order, it's been a millennia of a reciprocal relationship, and these are traditional mythological gods, not the Anunnaki, the space people as gods idea that most people are buying into.
Right.
That I don't necessarily, or at least not to the full extent anyway. And that's based on for me, it's based on experience.
Right.
So what's happening in this series, so the overall thing is happening is that the old gods, they have lost their attention. Many of them, they've migrated with all the immigrant populations into America, and as they become less and less directly worshipped, they become weaker and weaker, and basically you have people like Thoth and Anubis, have to take jobs in taking care of the dead in a funeral home. You have a spider god from Africa, Anansi, who's basically become a clothing maker. And that goes back to even the Native American have stories of spiders. They weave their stories that they weave create the world. That's right. The mythology. That's the real world that this world is based on. And the main character is called Wednesday, who is Odin. Wednesday is Odin. All of our days of the week are all named, not all named. Wednesday, Tuesday is Tu, which is the form of Ares, god of war.
God, that's right.
Monday is Moon. Sunday is Sun. Saturday is Saturn, Kronos. Thursday is Thor, and Friday is Freya, who's more or less Venus Aphrodite.
Right. Yep.
So Woden, who is like the father god, the head of the gods, of the Norse gods. So I guess he's kind of tired of being sort of, he kind of dresses like Columbo. He's sort of like frumpy. And he's trying to rally the old gods to war against the new gods. At least that's the surface story. There's actually another story underneath it, but I don't want to do spoilers unless you've read the book. And the new gods are technology. There's a techno boy who vapes and just morphs into a whole bunch of things. There's Mr. World, who no one knows exactly who he is, but he's kind of the head of the new techno gods. And then there's Media, who's wonderfully played by Gillian Anderson. It's nice to see her in a good role. So she morphs into various television icons or cultural icons. So she's been Lucy, she's been Marilyn Monroe. She did an incredible Bowie also.
Yeah.
So there's all that. So it's heading into this this supposed war between the new gods and the old gods. The new gods are saying, we don't care, we can just basically wait you out anyway. As Media says at one point, something along the lines of, people do all their worshiping at the screen now. No one does any worshiping at an altar.
Yeah, it's true.
So the series ends with Odin on Easter Sunday. That's actually the best one is the last one. On Easter Sunday, going to visit Öster, who is the Norse version. The word Easter comes from the goddess Ursta, who is the spring fertility goddess.
Right.
And he basically convinces her to join up with him, and by withholding the spring, which is what Demeter does also in Greek mythology after Persephone is abducted and by Pluto, and she withholds the spring. So you have to. So in order to get that real worship, in other words, she was getting placated because it was Easter, and Easter is remembered, but it's remembered because of Christ. And the funny thing in the scene was there's like about 30 Christs there.
Oh my God!
At the scene, there's because there's plenty of Jesuses. There's Jesuses all over the place, and it's true. There's a whole mess of Jesuses,
Right.
So anyway, so it's a great scene. But so you got a couple of things about it though that it just the question is, right, the whole thing about who are the gods and what is our relationship with them, and in the end, in the many of the Gnostic traditions and many traditions, the idea is to recognize your own divinity. And I think I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's somewhere where the book leads to, because it ends up to be this sort of self-sacrifice on the tree of Drazel, which is the Norse tree that Odin hangs from.
Right. Isn't that where they get the runes from as well, aren't they?
That's where he gets exactly.
Yeah.
He hangs on there until he understands the meaning of the runes.
Yeah.
And he also gives up one of his eye to drink from the fountain of knowledge.
And he's hanging upside down, right? And he's like the hanged man, isn't that right?
I'm not absolutely sure. You're probably right.
I think he's hanging. It's the symbol of the hanged man, and it's through that suspension. It's almost like being in purgatory. That something comes. There's a flash of knowledge and insight. But you have to surrender. I mean, there's nothing you can do. Once the surrender occurs, then the Gnostic flash occurs theoretically. So how is this impacting how you view everyday life? Right? How is it altering your filter? Like when you go down the street, are you seeing, hey, there's a God here, there's a God there? I mean, is it animating your experience?
Well, I've always done that, so it's not. It's not, in other words, when, for example, if there's that oil spill in the Gulf.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that was something for me coming from Persephone, coming from the underground deities.
Yeah.
And so that's something if I have a practice left, it may be something like that, to trying to see the world in terms of the divine archetypes. Because you're thing that this leads to, and you go back to hanging on the tree, and that surrender is a sacrifice. And what is it a sacrifice of? It is a sacrifice of your selfhood on one hand, your illusory selfhood, the selfhood that thinks it's this individuated whole thing that exists apart from everything else.
Right.
It's just this sort of continuously generated fiction.
Yeah.
If you sacrifice that, that's what allows for your understanding of yourself as divinity, and then as this particular experience of divinity within this realm. And this goes, and this goes back to this whole concept of the world as an illusion. And in India, Maya is illusion, but Maya is a deity.
Right.
And the world is it's really tough. It's really tough for us right now because first of all, there's the grand divine illusion, the fact that we think there's a solid world out there.
Right.
Right. The fact that we've the idea of solidity and that there are things that exist outside of my direct experience. Mm-hmm. But from the mystic perspective, there's nothing besides your direct experience. There's nothing besides the moment. There's nothing besides the senses and the elements. And the senses and the elements are divinities also. And so that's the main. So that's the ground illusion. But you still have to live as if. Exactly. Right? So it's not a matter of whether it's real or not, whether there's something. So the illusion is that there is something else besides it's not even an illusion, it's just the way it's constructed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? And so then what life becomes is a matter of navigation. How do you navigate it?
Right, exactly. Right? Yeah.
And so now, but of course, so you've got that, but then we've got layers above that. So you can't even get to, right, I'm just, living my world, and then, maybe I have a mystical experience, maybe I practice, maybe the shaman does the practices for the tribe and informs the tribe, however that works. But now we have, so this gets back to what's, people are struggling with, the real versus fake news. Well, of course, there's nothing real in terms of that. Right. Yep. So you can hope for some sort of contingent truth, maybe, Mm-hmm. I think that's the best you can kind of hope for. Mm-hmm. But of course, then you've got the layers. You've got the CIA layering, and you've got, the media layering, and you've got, as you talked about the other day, there's really nothing that's untouched between, food, media, the water, the skies. Oh gosh, I just found out that from a friend of ours, there were like 140 flu deaths at the beginning in North Carolina at the beginning of this year. Remember, there was a huge chemtrail thing from just before the election up through the inauguration. We had a couple of friends that almost died. And a friend of ours was a healer, was talking to another healer, and she did some tests, and they found that the Lyme virus was involved in much, if not most of this. Lyme, Lyme, as in Lyme's disease. Yeah, yeah. And not from ticks, because you don't get ticks in the winter. No. So they were actually spraying. Yeah, of course. They were actually spraying that. Yeah, most of us are so toxic with these contagions, and a lot of it is dormant, or it might flash at various points in time if your immune system is compromised. I mean, we're walking around with things inside of us that would horrify us, I think, if we were really aware of what was floating around in there. So to your point, I mean, and what I brought up is that we're living with layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of illusion in just about every single aspect of our lives. And so the synthetic reality is encroaching upon our reality and is choking off this connection to the magical world that you are alluding to with your relationship to mythopoesis and being able to see things from a different perspective and a different level. And that's what's happening is that's being compromised. Mm-hmm. And people are being turned essentially into synthetic beings living in a increasingly synthetic environment. These are the last cries of the human species in many ways. Exactly. So the way out of it, to me, the best way out of it is we call it discriminative discernment. And in this case, it would be to understand what is abstraction and what is experience. Okay? And so, everything is happening in Syria, that gets everybody bent out of shape, et cetera, et cetera. Everything you hear everywhere is basically an abstraction. It's it's your experience in that you're watching it on the news, etc. But the way out of that, because the abstraction, as you say, it gets more and more and more and more, and the ultimate abstraction is the artificial intelligence, is the completely which would be a completely mediated experience. The neural net that these guys want to put, neural lace. That's it, neural lace. The little doily they want to put in their head. Yeah, I know. It's like they have these places all over the country where they do testing. Right, they'll pay you to come in and wear the neural net, and what they do is they gauge your response
to certain stimuli, certain products, and based on that, they take that information and then they sell it back to the people who are trying to market and sell us stuff. They're all over the country, these little places. So there's one right down the road here from us in Austin. But you're right. I mean, there's probably a greater neural net that we're all being sort of invisibly cloaked with, and we're not even aware of it.
Yeah, that's probably true too. So the idea is to get back to what is your direct experience, and at least hold on to that as being at least as real as you can get. Mm-hmm. Your senses,
yeah,
the elements, and and there are obviously ways of at least getting out into nature and to foster those connections, and in those connections, are the divinities, are the gods, and then if that's where your attention is, that's where the reciprocal arrangement comes in.
Yeah.
So even just standing. I mean, that's why Chris grows so much, and we have an amazing garden. Is it just comes out of nowhere. Every year we're just totally blown away by the magic of a garden.
Yeah.
Coming out of nowhere, and so that's one step that keeps you connected with what's real, and that's all, and that's Erster. That's the spring. That's the goddess.
Yeah.
Manifesting continuously.
Yeah. Yeah. Bit of a non sequitur here, but I think a little bit aligned with what we're talking about. I have a family friend. It's it's on my ex-wife's side, and about a year ago she was riding a bicycle. About a year and a half ago she was riding a bicycle, and she suffered a significant injury, lots of injuries, broken ribs, but the biggest injury was to her brain, and she wound up having to relearn so many things. Like, she was almost reduced to a child. I mean, I would listen to her in conversations. It was pretty fascinating and kind of startling to hear somebody, who is, 2 years older than me, right around 58, talking like they're 8 or 9 years old, But she's been going through all these various cycles of therapy and, getting more cognitive and, more in line with her faculties. And she sent me an email kind of out of the blue 2 days ago. And the email was, she said, "You're the only person I can send this to," because she started to relate to me that she was having very different perceptions of reality based on this head injury. And she was seeing things around people that she had never seen before. And there were a number of different pieces of phenomena that she was experiencing. And it was almost as if she was having some form of synesthesia with her day-to-day experience and feeling very good about it, to be honest with you. I mean, all those things that you and I and other people really have a lot invested in, like being able to exchange information, ideas, extrapolate. She didn't really have that, but she got her volume turned up in a different kind of way.
Right. And
it really was like, wow, this is fascinating. She's some part of her brain which was dormant got triggered, and got me thinking about just how little of the brain we use and what's dormant, and how in a lot of ways what's happening with this process that you and I are talking about is shrinking that even further. And, how do we break out and expand? And maybe this is a much bigger question that you weren't prepared to deal with today. But it's like, how do we engage with the parts of our brain that we're just not always in connection with? And can we, on a day-to-day basis, living like that in some ways?
Right. Well, it's very interesting because what that just triggered is that maybe that's on one hand maybe that's a direction that we need to go to or eventually, because right now we're just riddled with thought.
That's right.
And thought is what's real, and I say a couple times in my book that you can't get to the real through thought, and that's a legacy from Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah.
That the real can be gotten through thought. and so something happens, and your thought processes are shot. In fact, someone just sent us.
Our friend Lou from Sydney just sent us a link to an NPR story. It was an interview with a woman who had a severe brain injury, and one of the things that Lou was remarking about was that people all around her were so distressed and upset, and she was not.
Yeah.
Because all of that distress and worrying about, oh my God, I can't think anymore, I've lost my brain. Well, she didn't have the thoughts.
Right.
And so, it's all linguistically structured. The whole world is chanted into existence through language.
Yep.
And that's why in Sanskrit or in the Indian system, Vach, V-A-C, with a little hook on the bottom, Vach, is speech and is a goddess. And it's recognized that it's speech and language that creates the world for you. So you are constantly reifying or concretizing your world through language.
Yes.
When she lost her ability to have that complexity of language, she was freed in a way.
Absolutely.
And like your friend, she was not all that upset about it. Of course, it's a catastrophe on one level, but on another level, it opened something for her.
Yeah. Don't remember the name. Apparently, she wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
I guess as she's come back.
He sent us the link.
To bounce off what Chris said about the goddess Vach in the Rig Veda, goddess Vach precedes all the other gods. So not only does the human world come out of that, but the divine world comes out of that also. And so that's all the ancient poetry, the Rig Vedic poetry. That's why that poetry is chanted, is to keep that world alive. And then without that world, we end up, heading more and more towards the mechanical.
And repetition is the key. So, how it is when, as a kid coming up through church, you were constantly repeating all of the prayers over and over and over. And
right.
Practice yoga, you're giving your mantras and you repeat them over and over and over. Well, that's reifying that particular perspective of your reality.
Right.
So the more you repeat it, and of course, the powers that be are wise to that, so they keep repeating these new mantras to replace your sacred ones. So these are desecrated mantras that we're receiving and taking in, and it's like junk food. So it just sullies your perception of reality.
Absolutely. Look at Chris coming strong today. Nice job, Chris.
I don't know why you're interviewing me. But yeah. So that's the same dynamic that American Gods is addressing. The media Vach, the media chant versus the divine chant, and the divine chant is trying to make a stand or something. But everything is also called under question. It's an interesting book. I recommend it. And, it's the other aspect of it that is this whole immigrant thing that seems to be a little bit on the politically motivated side. And just like all the gods come in with the immigrants, and there is one sort of buffalo that shows up, but there's really nothing. Well, they did have one scene where the Native Americans were coming across the Bering Strait, but I just had one other thought. I know we're probably running over here, but about the other interesting show going on right now is called Handmaid's Tale, which is based on the Margaret Atwood book from the mid-'80s, which I read back then. I haven't seen the show yet, but what really strikes me about that, and that's a really scary show. That show pretty much depicts what happens if Trump is gone, and Pence and DeVos and Cruz get to put in their Dominionists.
The Dominionists, yeah, there you go.
Right, and so. But what I started thinking about was the real legacy of American immigration is this Puritan and penal kind of thing, which is really brought out to its apotheosis in the book, because you have this surface holy thing, and then you have this complete debauchery going on in secret. And I don't know how maybe that hooks in somewhere with the American chart, but that's really what we are. we got this whole exterior just BS moral thing going on. In the meantime, we're just huge with the porn is like still the biggest thing going on. So anyway, that's just a thought on that, and but just to say, if you get back into what is your experience, and that'll at least give you a break from the rest of it, and maybe take a rest from thoughts.
Taking a rest from the thoughts, that sounds like a wonderful thing to do. I think we could all take a break from sort of the monkey mind and the banging around between the two ears. Coming full circle, just to bring people up to date and up to speed, apparently Pope Francis, this is from about 8 hours ago, has defrocked an Italian priest convicted of child sex abuse. So there's another kind of hit on the radar here for the Catholic Church. Now, he has not defrocked Pell as of yet. So it's going to be a huge test now for the Church to see what Francis does here, because this guy Pell probably also has a lot of the Church's secrets at his disposal as well. And of course,
yes.
being a good Catholic, I'm sure he would never leverage that.
No. So. And even if he cleans it up just to make himself look good, at least it's something.
Do the right thing for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I always look forward to our chats here on the final Friday of every month. They're very rich and informative, and I love tapping into what you can share from your perspective and your background, which is pretty thorough when it comes to mythology and bringing things up to the present. So, hey, thank you so much, guys, and have a wonderful day there in lovely North Carolina, okay?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Robert. Take care.
Steve and Chris Crimi from Logos Sophia Press. There they are.
All right, that was Steve and Chris Crimi from Logos Sophia Publications down in North Carolina. And it was a nice, interesting, and sparking conversation we had there that covered a lot of different topics. I really enjoyed Steve's sort of foray into living mythology and magic and animating the world around us in ways that are personal and powerful and magical, right? I mean, that's really what it's about. The last Friday of every month, that's what we do. We sit down, we'll talk with Steve. Chris chimes in a little bit, cover a few topics, and hopefully teases some awareness and thought and discussion out of your head and your heart and into the lives of other people. Isn't that great? We get to talk about these things and share these things with one another. One of the things I want to share with you is that you're listening to the Friday FARcast. I'm Robert Phoenix, and we're going to get into a special astrology show on Sunday night with the live stream, trying a few different things to get it at a more robust level here. And we'll be looking at the chart of the United States, and I think we'll probably take the Sunday night show to really look at the American eclipse that's taking place on the 21st of August. And I'll also get into sort of the history of the false flags that are connected with the United States that actually launched the American Revolution. And I might even throw in a few excerpts from Saul Alinsky. I've been reading Saul Alinsky lately. I've been reading Rules for Radicals. It's actually pretty brilliant. And not that I agree with the, how do I say this, the application of it, but I think Alinsky's got the playbook for revolution. It's right, I mean, it is right up there. Rules for Radicals is right up there with The Art of War by Sun Tzu and The Prince by Machiavelli. It rivals both of those. And let me give you a little bit of an excerpt from, and look, I think Alinsky had clearly a dark side. But because he's an Aquarius, he was, and this is what Aquarians do, he was fighting for the little guy. Right? He saw the rise of the corrupt systems in the country. And he had a sense of righteousness. And he was looking out for the underdog. I mean, that's Lucifer's story too, right? I mean, that's how Atlantis started. Lucifer saw the poor, wretched masses of Lemuria and said, "Come huddle with me. I will create a new world for you and raise you up out of your dismal circumstances. And we will rebel against the God who created you and left you in such a shambles." Right? I mean, that's kind of what the story of Atlantis and Lucifer is. Anyway, he has that spirit in him, clearly. But here's an excerpt from Rules for Radicals. He was taking on a corporation who was screwing a bunch of people over. This was back in, I think, the early 60s. And it was this contentious legal battle, and the lawyers from this company came to him and said, "We've got pictures of you going to a certain hotel with a certain Miss So-and-so." And Alinsky didn't care because they were consenting adults, in a time where morality was a little more uptight. It still would have kind of fit into this framework of being quote-unquote acceptable. So he said, "Fine, do it. Use it. I don't care." And they didn't. But what happened is that there was somebody inside the corporation who was sympathetic to Alinsky and the plight of the workers. Somebody had a conscience, apparently. And they said that, well, I've got some dirt here, and it has to do with the CEO or somebody that was fairly high in the company, and I've got a lot of information that he really likes men instead of women. And it's yours. And Alinsky didn't take it. And he didn't want to sully the moral ground, as it were. He rose above it. No, I'm not going to do that. We don't do that. But in reality, what he did is he knew that he was going to win the case, and he didn't need it. He didn't need it. If he thought that they would not win the case, he would have taken it, you see. And in Rules for Radicals, it's about a means to an end. The means justify the end, right? Or the end justifies the means. That's what we're really talking about. It's a fascinating work, to be honest with you. And it's clear, it's lucid, and takes on this sort of topography of a shifting morality, but always towards some revolutionary point that would be liberating and in favor of the have-nots or the lesser-thans. And based on that, it makes the revolutionary action not only appealing, but it also gives it sort of a moral justification in some ways. Now, the reason why I'm talking about it is because I feel like we're on this interesting pivot moment where Alinsky's ideologies and philosophies were employed by the left, and favorably employed. It helped elect Barack Obama. Barack Obama comes out of that school of community organizing. He studied under people who had studied under Alinsky, and of course Hillary Clinton supposedly had an affair with Saul Alinsky. She went right from college to sit at his elbow. So Hillary Clinton is no dummy. I mean, she spent time with Saul, and Saul Alinsky was a big brain. And again, I'm not advocating Rules for Radicals or Alinsky per se. I'm looking at the work and how it understands the nature and the dynamics of power. It is absolutely brilliant. And he goes into Foucault, he goes into de Tocqueville, he goes into Napoleon. I mean, there's a lot of different, Mark Twain, he pulls from a lot of different sources. So the reason I'm bringing it up, because it feels like there's this pivot moment happening where the left has become the bourgeoisie, right? Obama flies off to Italy in a private jet. He stays and occupies the entire floor of a hotel. He has a motorcade. He makes $3 million for his speech. I mean, if that's not the bourgeoisie, I don't know what is. And when Trump tapped into this whole network of deplorables, this is the underclass. This is the underclass now. These are the people that are getting screwed over. And the screwing is not coming from corporations per se, although they've taken their fair share out of their lives by removing companies and jobs from the United States. Let's be clear about that. Corporate America is not necessarily Middle America's friend. It's only Middle America's friend until Middle America proves to be less profitable. And that's the nature of a corporation. Every now and then you might find a corporation that might have some real heart and say, we're going to hang in there, we're going to do the right thing, we're going to be here for the people. But they're there for the shareholders, they're there for the board, and they're there for the health and the ongoing preservation of the entity of the corporation. That comes first. People are a second or a third. Right? So he's tapped into the deplorables, the deplorable network. Meanwhile, the left has been celebrating its bourgeois existence for quite a long time. Certainly since Obama came into office, every day was a party. Every day they were playing Cool in the Gang, right? Woo-hoo! But something has shifted, something has flipped. And now, just like everything else that has been inverted, really. Everything else has been inverted. And we've checked the inversion box. The right is the new left. The right is the new left. And the left is the new right, because the left has been demonstrating and initiating fascistic tactics. You know, whether it's deploying Antifa. By the way, I saw this video last night on YouTube. Oh my God. That's one of the ones I had to sift through in order to get to, some of the really good stuff, right? And there's this demonstration in Portland, anti-fascist demonstration. And it's a small ragtag group of Antifa. And apparently there's this guy who lives in Portland who is a complete antagonist. I mean, he just goes after people, right? I mean, he's interesting. Like, he's this black guy, and he's a conservative. And he is totally in the face of Antifa. And he goes around with his video camera, and they were at a, 9 or 10, 12 people Antifa demonstration, and he was goading them. And there's this guy who's in transition to be a woman, who's part of Antifa Portland, and gets really frustrated against this guy who's calling him out. And the guy, the trans is telling them to, get the F out, get the F out, get the F out, get the F out of here, F you, and you can just see the anger. And, see, it's like those old cartoons where the thermometer is, and this guy is like, no, I don't have to do it, make me, no, make me. He's just goading this trans guy, and you can just see this, like, the wheels are just spinning in trans guy's head, like, Are you gonna hit him? And he's another guy that's following him with a camera. And all of a sudden, Train's guy just says, I'm gonna hit him. So he hits this guy who's the antagonist, and then the guy says, is that all you got? And he hits the other guy back, throws him down, gets on top of him, and starts pounding him. Of course, all the Antifa people rush in and pull him off. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, this is the world we're living in now, right? So you have this black conservative guy in Portland going hand-to-hand, toe-to-toe with this trans Antifa guy. It's just bizarre. This is totally bizarre. Strange stuff. Anyway, we're living in interesting times. Very interesting times. What we're going to do is we're going to get into Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, starting this week. I found a great video on YouTube. Let me see if I can give this to you here. The publisher of the video is Grindal61, and let me get it's really worth watching. And if he made the movie, I'm going to try to get him on. I think he did. The movie is called Agenda 21, the movie, The Megacities Are Coming. And what's really good about this video is that he spends a lot of time going from town meeting to town meeting to town meeting, where these dipshits who are essentially working for the UN are trying to force their agenda onto these regions, and there are 11 regions that they've created, and it's through these community quote-unquote meetings where they use the Delphi process and all that stuff, and basically just cut people off from any kind of real participation. And he goes into a lot of these meetings, and there's this one guy who's, what's his name? So I can find him. I might even play a clip here. It might be a little low. Let me see if I can just find this guy, play a clip. Let me see this. What's it say? Yeah, SCAG. SCAG, isn't that an interesting name? SCAG is the organization. I think it's Southern California something growth. You can look it up. SCAG. Anyway, this is going on, and we're going to be spending more time looking into Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which is being pushed by the Aspen Institute. And the Aspen Institute, one of the main players is Walter Isaacson. In fact, he might even be the main player. And right now he's down in New Orleans, and he's transforming New Orleans and turning it into an Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 city pretty much overnight. And that's where he's putting a lot of his time and effort. And so what they'll do is they will use New Orleans as kind of the template for how to flip an American city. And they've already done some of this in California, where it's a lot easier because theoretically people in California are more open to this. One of the interesting things that they're doing is they're really targeting millennials, which I talked a little bit about, I believe, earlier, but they're targeting millennials, and they're trying to create sort of the future Disneyland for millennials. So the millennials just go, okay, I just want to live here. I want to live here. I want to get into this little green prison because I can get my craft beer, my craft ice cream, and my craft yoga, and I don't have to struggle for it. I don't have to move for it. And to some degree, I get it. I understand it. You know, we driving across town, sometimes it's a real hassle to get something. You know, I get it. But convenience is the Antichrist. And if that's the model, then good luck. Good luck with that. The other thing, too, is that one of the threads that is concurrent with Agenda 2030 is they keep going over Oh, well, like for instance, they're building, and this is an interesting factoid, they're building massive stacking and packers all throughout Southern California. West Covina, Fontana, San Bernardino, you name it, the stacking and packers are coming. Pasadena, they're coming. And in large numbers. Now, they're talking about growth. They're talking about people and increases to population. And yet, people are leaving California in droves. They're leaving California. Californians are tired of having to deal with this bullshit. And there's no representation, unless, of course, you're on the side of the megalopolis, the megacity, and the green prisons. What I call them, green prisons. In which case, you've got your pom-poms out. Yeah, let's go. Yay. But people are leaving. So then why are they building all of these structures? Well, I guess they're building them so that maybe the millennials that stick around will want to stay. But they're expecting more people, right? They're expecting growth. But if people are leaving, where's that growth coming from? Well, it's coming from people outside of the country. Now, clearly, Mexico is a feeder, and has been for California for a long time. But it's not just going to be Mexico. It'll be, whole or parts of Central America, and the big transference of people in the 21st century are going to come from Africa, Sub-Sahara. That's where the new population is going to come from. Places like Nigeria, places like Somalia, Mali. You know the players. The Kenyans to some degree, they're coming. Right, but it's really going to be the Somalians, the Malians, to the Sudanese. They're the ones that are coming. And look, it's going to be a major shockwave. If you look at what's happening in Europe, that's the plan. They started with South Africa, and they're completely gutting South Africa. It's kind of open season in South Africa. And the plan has been put into place in Europe. They had, 17,000 people from Sub-Saharan Africa show up in Italy 2 days ago. Like, so many people, they can't even process them. 17,000 people. Can you believe that? 17,000 people in like a 48-hour period. 17,000 people. That's like you're just starting a new town. 17,000, that's a huge amount of people. And it's not going to abate. And what they have started in Europe, it's going to be duplicated and mirrored here in the United States. And again, I don't care what country or continent people come from. It's the numbers, and it is the level of assimilation. Look, I may turn some people off here. I'm sorry, but we're headed down a very, very slippery slope, and it is programmed. It's programmed. This is part of the next wave of completely altering civilization as we know it. The time of you and your wife or your husband or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever saying, hey, look, let's go get a house somewhere, let's settle down around, and I don't care, again, what stripe you are, but say, hey, we want to settle down with people that are in our community, people that we relate to. I remember one time I was on this plane, and it was a jet. Whatever. And I was going to Germany, and I went to Frankfurt. And I flew on this plane with this guy who was second generation Russian. He was Jewish, and he made a shitload of money. Went to Stanford, and he made his money on a computer program that worked with companies who were trying to collect on debt. So what the program would do is it would basically prioritize who would have the best chance of being collected from. So if you're a debt company and you can basically prioritize, make a hierarchy of who you're going to go after first, like the low-hanging fruit, versus who you've got to really put some sweat equity into or sell that debt to another collector at some point, you would want this program because it would make your life easier for you. You'd get a faster return on your investment, right? So this is what this guy created. He made a lot of money out of it. And we're talking, and he was very proud of the fact that he did not have a suitcase, that he had an apartment in I think he was going to Paris. And he had an apartment that he could go to, and there were clothes there. Like, he didn't need any clothes. They were already there. He was very proud of this fact. This cosmopolitan. Anyway, he was telling me how much he loved Ashland, Oregon. Oh, I love this place. I love this place. It's so beautiful. And my children love it, and my wife, she loves it. Oh, I love this place. If I could move there, if I could move to Ashland, I'd move there. And I'm like, well, obviously you've got a lot of money. Why don't you just move to Ashland? And he's like, no, I could not do that. I'm like, well, why not? And he basically said to me that there weren't enough Jewish people living in Ashland, because that's where he lived in Palo Alto, that everybody in his neighborhood came from roughly the same background or the same religion. And so therefore it was really easy for him to live there. Why would he want to live? He would be naked, he'd be exposed, he would be the outsider in a place like Ashland, Oregon, even though he really loved it. And you know what? I understood it. I got it. It's like, that's where you want to be. You see, that's how people are. They want to be around people that they can relate to, that they have similar traditions to, that they have similar points of view with. I don't have a problem with that. And I remember even when I was living in Southern California, and we had a nanny, and she was from Mexico. She was living here. She was a citizen. She was great, phenomenal person. And she got ripped off by this guy and he was fixing her car. And she told me about it. And I'm like, well, why don't you go over there and talk to this guy? So I went over to this one part of Southern California area called San Marcos. There's another San Marcos in Texas here, but this is near San Diego. And I went there, and it was like I was in Mexico. I mean, it was like this total enclave. I mean, they had a whole like sub-society going on there. And, there were stores that were clearly, created for the people that were living there. Everything was in Spanish. I mean, it was like, okay, well, there's no assimilation going on here. I totally see that. And I tried to help her out with her car. But here, okay, so it's like, okay, well, that's fine. We accept that. Or we accept, on the other side of the spectrum, the wealthy computer programmer who only wants to live around people of his faith or his background or his upbringing. But you get white people who want to live together, what happens? You want to break up the team. I mean, I swear to God, that's what happens. That's what happens. And all of a sudden, you've got diversity. Diversity comes in. I'm just telling it like it is. You may not like it. It may hurt you to hear this. You may think, oh my God, he's a racist bastard. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you what goes on. This is what's happening. And ultimately, this is about not just creating sustainable cities, but completely revamping the social structure of not just this country, but the world. The entire world. can say no. We can say no. And it's time we said no. And I think that one of the things, this goes back to Saul Alinsky and the rules for radicals, is that those are tools that are available now. You see, at some point, there was a Rubicon that was crossed. At some point, there was a Rubicon that was crossed. And all of a sudden, everything was turned upside down. And the network of deplorables, the people in the flyover states, the people that don't have anybody representing them anymore, abandoned by the Democratic Party, abandoned by the fat cat, rich-ass Republicans who don't give a shit about them and only give them lip service. These are the people that are now the front lines for a revolution. It's them. It is not Antifa. It is not the social justice warriors and SJWs. They don't have the stomach for it. I'm telling you right now. And there's some great pieces around millennialism, the local stuff, and there's some really good things, right? Even the reusable economy, Airbnb, a millennial idea. Steve and Chris, if you're down in North Carolina, you want to avail yourselves of their Airbnb, they have one, right? So these are ideas that are being promoted and circulated, and they're good ones, and they work, right? It's not just about staying in a sterile motel. You can actually stay in somebody's home that's actually nice, and they've taken care of it, and it's a unique experience in some ways. And often, or occasionally, you'll even connect with the Airbnb owner. You might have a relationship that comes out of that. How often do you have a relationship with the night clerk at Quality Inns or Comfort Inn, whatever? That doesn't really happen. Unless you're trying to buy drugs from them. In which case it probably doesn't happen anyway. No, I'm just joking. So I'm not decrying the whole thing. I mean, there's some things that are valuable, right? But I think at the end of the day, the people that have the stomach for a revolution, a real revolution, are the people that have been left behind. And of course, that's why Trump became successful. That's why he was elected. He tapped into that zeitgeist. And whether it was Steve Bannon or Sean Miller or Eric Trump or Donald Trump Jr. or Jared Kushner, who knows, right? I mean, these were the people that Trump was able to articulate their frustration and their inability to speak their truth or unlock their voice. Trump became their voice, for better or worse. And these are the people that would really benefit from Saul Alinsky now. The tide has turned, I'm telling you. The tide has turned. The progressives and the Democrats and the uber liberals, they became too bloated. They're bloated. And they don't really stand for anything. Because it's funny, right? It's like Alinsky talks about an action. You could only stay with an action for so long, or else it loses the energy. And I would say that the election and the re-election of Barack Obama was the pinnacle of the ongoing 40-year action of the social Marxists and the left. He became the manifestation of that. And at that point, then they began to get into these sub-actions, Black Lives Matter, and the duality and divide and conquer and all that stuff. And that became very, very an integral part of the last 3 years of the Obama administration. It's a really terrible legacy, to be honest with you. I'm just going on the record with that. But that was the apex. They spent all of their moral, psychological, and spiritual capital to that point to get Barack Obama elected, re-elected, and then move that agenda forward. Because when Hillary Clinton went to run for the second time, that account was bankrupt. There was nothing left. Absolutely nothing left. The demonization of Trump, the demonization of men, the demonization of the people, the deplorables that Hillary so nonchalantly let fly in one of her speeches. It was bankrupt. It was gone. There was nothing left in the tank. Identity politics had completely and utterly evaporated. And if it weren't for probably a few crooked precincts in California, in Nevada, and New Mexico, Trump would have won the popular vote as well. No doubt. No doubt. And who knows where else. So they cannot use the same, and they try all the time. Obama's leading this other group now, and they're trying desperately to mobilize people in the same way that the community organizers in Chicago through Acorn, whatever other group, have done for decades. The problem is, here's the real problem, is that what are they organizing against? You see, if the majority of the people were living at, say, the upper 10%, and they were doing so in a way that was callous and cruel, they might have some energy, They might have a boots on the ground kind of force to be reckoned with, because at that level, right, you're dealing with a large group of people who have a large group of resources, and they don't give a shit. Now you've got some cannon fodder, right? Now you've got cannon fodder. You can use that. Now that is your leverage around morality, the moral linchpin. But that's not the case, because a lot of people are just struggling to get by. People working 2 jobs, people living week to week, people maxing out their credit cards. Are these really the people that you want to go after? Because aren't these the people that you should be courting instead of going after? So the demonization of Trump and the alt-right, and it's about white nationalism and white separatism, and they're Nazis, and in fact, that's not going to work either. You know why? It's not the case. It is not the case. Yes, everybody has a slight degree of inborn prejudice. You show me somebody that does it, and I'll show you somebody who should be canonized, or is close to it. We've all got it to some degree or another. But to paint with such a broad stroke brush that this is the state of affairs in America is yet another deposit in a morally corrupt bank account, a morally bankrupt account. There's nothing there. Sure, there are pockets, but I'll tell you what, you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and guess what will happen? Yeah, you will turn people, and you won't bring them into your camp. You will push them away. There'll be more polarization, and there'll be more people when you say, F you, we've had it with your bullshit. And that day may be coming. It may be coming. Would it be better if we were all on the same page? Because I guarantee you, if you sat down with somebody on the left who's, and they're, let's put them in the upper 15%, which is pretty good. You're living in the upper 15%, you're doing pretty good. And they've got a nice house, and they've got kids, and they raise them there, but they like to donate to their progressive causes because it makes them feel good, gives them a sense of community, right? Sense of moral appreciation that they're doing the right thing. And I guarantee you, if you said to them, hey, how would you like to have this house taken away from you? It's too big of a carbon footprint. And that vacation that you and your husband take every year, that vacation where you go to that beautiful place down in Mexico, and then you go back east to see your relatives once a year. You go that vacation. Well, you can't have them both. You can't have them both. So you got to pick one. Oh, your car, and I know it's a nice Prius, because we pat you on the back for doing that, And your husband has his own version. He's got a hybrid. He's got a Lexus hybrid. So you guys are going to pray. But guess what? You could only have one. That's right. Yeah, I know. You can't. You won't be able to go off and drive and get your massage. Sorry. It's not going to work. But you could move closer to the massage. You see, we've got this really nice development that's just 3 blocks away from where you get your massage. You'll have to downsize. Your place will be 500 square feet, but you'll be doing it for a good cause. You'll be giving up a lot of your creature comforts so that future generations will be able to live on this planet. Right? Isn't that noble? Do you think people would do that? Some might. Some are stupid enough to do it. But there are people who will not do that. They'll say, oh, well, this is what let somebody else do it. I can't do it right now because my parents are older, and they may need to, come someplace and they won't fit. Oh, your parents, don't worry about them. They're on a death panel anyway. I'm sorry. Slipping into darkness. Yeah, are they going to do it? No, they're not going to do it. Of course not. Now, their kids might if they've been brainwashed enough. But really, the Stack'em and Pack'ems, these cities, they're not. They're not for me and you. Although some might be. They're for the people that are going to come here. That's what they're there for. The reduction, the replacement population. This replacement population therapy is practiced by Europe. And how well is that going? It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Covering a lot of ground there, aren't we? I'm feeling feisty. Yeah! Anyway, this is where we're going to be spending a lot of time from this point forward. Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and we're here to pull back the curtain. I'm going to have at least one item on the 15 minutes of flame where we're pulling back the curtain on Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. Astrologically, that's going to connect into the 7-year cycle of Uranus and Taurus, where we transform, radically remake our structures, our physical structures. That's Taurus. Cancer, emotional structures. Taurus, physical structures. I think what we really need is we need to reclaim the wild. And we need to reclaim the wild in, I think, here's what I think, okay? Somebody out there, like, if I had a shitload of money, I'm going to swear, if I had a shitload of money, you know what I'd do? I'd buy really small towns. I'd buy really small towns and I'd invest in them. And I'd invest solar, I'd invest in the infrastructure of the town. And then I would try to get businesses to come to that town. And I would reinvest in towns that are 15,000 people and under. That's what I would do. That's what I would do. Because I think you could have the same experience in your urban centers where everybody has every little, every little piece of relaxation, recreation, right at their disposal. It's right there. Walk down the street, don't have to lift a finger, let the drone bring it, right? Can't get drone delivery out in the urban areas. The drones don't have that. Their range isn't that far. But if you live inside the megalopolis, where you get those high-speed drones, bring you sushi. Wouldn't you like that? The sushi drone? And they look like they're Japanese and stuff, and they look really cool, the Hornets or whatever. Here comes the sushi drone, or the pizza drone, hot pizza drone. You click on your little app, and that hot pizza drone is there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. The day's coming. Can't happen in the country, though. No, you might have to make your own pizza. How about that? Yep. You might have to catch your own fish. Not to say that I would make sushi out of river fish. I wouldn't. But you'd have to catch your own fish if you want to fish. Anyway, that's where it's happening. It's happening now. It is happening now. It's been happening for a while. And it's time to pull the curtain back. Everything else, with maybe the exception of what's going on in Syria and parts of the Middle East, is nothing but a distraction. All right. So we're an hour and 30 minutes into the show. So why don't we round off here? And I wanted to put out kind of an astrological thing. If you've never had a reading with me before, if you're a first-time client, I'm going to offer you a bit of a deal here. If you haven't been to my website, for years people have told me, you've got to raise your rates, raise your rates. You're too cheap. So I did. I raised my rates. And I did it about 2 weeks ago. I told people that I was about to raise my rates and that they would have an opportunity to get a reading at a reduced price before I did, and a lot of people jumped on it. So I'm going to have a 48-hour special. If you're listening to this, I'm going to do this through Monday. I'll remind people, so let's make it a 72-hour special. I'll remind people on Monday. I'll talk about it on the Sunday night live stream. And if you're a first-time client, I'm going to give you my old rate. How about that? If you're a first-time client, you get the old rate. You get the pre-rate raise rate. Okay? First-time client, that's what you get, which is about a $45 discount. I'm also offering a deal on my course, my video course right now. If you sign up for the video course, I've got an ad that's floating around on Facebook. If you sign up for the video course now, you'll get a 12-month transit report and a half-hour reading. How about that? It's not bad. Half-hour reading, 12-month transit report, and you get the course just by signing up for the course. Those are all available right now, and the course offer is available through July 4th. The first-time reading offer is available until the end of the day on Monday. So just putting it out there for y'all. All right, let's get on out of here. We took a wild ride today. Thanks again to Stephen and Chris over at Logos Sophia Press, and then I got on my high horse and I took a wild ride through Agenda 2030 land. This is Robert Phoenix. Use your head and discern what's real. Your heart too, stay open to what's possible. Have a great weekend. I'll see you guys on Sunday night.
Okay, let's do it.